Yep.
I'll be over there.
Okay.
If I do this, then we don't have questions from Slido, and we just continue.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Bit. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to the role of policy framework, standards, and support tools for businesses to become climate neutral. A very warm welcome both to the people who are here with us today in Brussels and to all the people who are participating online from all around the world. My name is Giovanni Collot, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. This event is jointly organized by SEN, Senelec, Eurochambre, and Business Europe. And these organizations joined forces to talk about a topic that is very close to their heart. In particular, we will discuss how standards, local business services, and technology solutions can be used as powerful tools on the path of business to net zero. And also, we will elaborate on how an incentivizing policy framework needs to look like. We will do that thanks to the participation of high-level speakers from the industry, from business associations, from UNFCCC, and the European Commission. But before actually jumping into the meat of the event, let me just explain a bit how this event will work. We will have a first panel where we will hear a series of keynote speeches and impulse statements by some of our speakers. And then a second part, which consists of a panel debate. Also, by the way, do not hesitate to ask questions through the Slido platform. At the end of the event, we will have a short time for a Q&A. But I already spoke too much, and so I'm happy to introduce the first speaker of today. He is Mr. Miguel Naranjo. Miguel Naranjo. He is a climate neutral now lead for the UNFCCC, and he will give us a speech that sets the scene for today's debate. Mr. Naranjo, the floor is yours. We don't hear you.
Thank you very much, Janek. As usual, one forgets to click the right button at the very moment. So thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. And thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. So my name, as you heard, is Miguel Naranjo. I work for the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change, specifically in the Global Climate Action Team, which is the one that is trying to collaborate with non-state actors, so private sector, academia, NGOs, civil society in general, to promote, facilitate, and recognize action on climate. So this is the background for having been invited here today. You are part of the stakeholders that we wish to collaborate with and as much as possible support in this transition to climate neutrality or net zero. So why are we interested in collaborating with you? I'm sure you must be tired of hearing this by now, but it's very important to repeat it. First, we have no choice. You have no choice but to act on climate. Climate is not only an existential threat for biodiversity in the planet, it's not just a threat to the possibilities for future generations, it is a threat for business. If society should collapse, if society go through trouble in its operations, there will be trouble for business as well. So as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development said decades ago, business cannot succeed in a society that fails. So this is why you should take action on climate. Why we want to work with you? Because governments and UN system will not be able to address this alone. We are all in this together. We, of course, need the power, the capacity for innovation that the private sector, the industries have. Now, standards are a very important piece of the puzzle, and it's becoming more and more recognized even under the negotiations that we're having here in Glasgow. Standards set the direction that the companies, the private sector, needs to follow in the design and delivery of its products and services. So it is imperative that those standards are aligned with our sustainable development goals, climate action, and all of the others. The standards are going to guide organizations on delivering these products and services, on how they will run their businesses. Therefore, they need to take into consideration what is the impact of the requirements that they are putting on products, services, and processes to ensure that they will support the achievement of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, instead of going, of course, against it. Standards on products and services are one of the tools. There are also other tools that interact very closely with them. You have, for example, the guidance on responsible business conduct by the OECD and the due diligence guidance. You have the collaboration of Senelec already with ISO around the 14,000 set of standards for sustainability. And then the ISO is right now working on the one for carbon neutrality, which I expect will be just the first step towards the net zero one or climate neutrality one eventually. So it is very important that all of these connections are also made, the standards for products, services, and processes, with further guidelines and standards for the operations of business. Now, last thing I will say is you, private sector, are the ones bringing the transformation in our products and services, again, in the way we do things to the general public. You have a very important role in doing that and in taking innovation wherever it's coming from and putting it or making it accessible to all of us. So we need to ensure that the standards help you do that in a sustainable manner. I think I leave it for there now, Janik. So very broad view, and should we have time for Q&A, happy to go into detail. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Naranjo. Now I would like to move to hearing to a series of impulse statements from representatives of the three organizing organizations of today. We will hear from Christoph Graser, Chair of the Sen and Senelec Sector Forum of Energy Management and Manager at Siemens Energy. Lina Constantinopoulou, Policy Director at Eurochambre, who is today sharing the stage here with me. And then, last but not least, Torbjörg Fossum, Vice President at Global CCS Solutions, Equinor. I'm happy to leave the floor now to Christoph Graser.
Okay, thank you very much, Yannick. And first of all, I feel deeply honored for having been invited to this meeting. And I think I can just jump in very seamlessly to what Miguel has highlighted previously. As you have just heard, I'm working with Siemens Energy, that energy technology company that roughly a year ago was separated from Siemens AG. And so that's the private sector. And I see really, because I'm very deeply involved in projects, also how dramatically, in the light of what's going on in the energy sector, our business is about to change. And I have to say, I'm very happy to work for such a company that really took that challenge very serious and is really driving that change proactively rather than just reactively work on what's going on. So that's my background. So I'm really working on construction sites and everything, and see how the projects have changed. Okay, the background for being invited here is actually the chairmanship of the Sen Senelec Sector Forum Energy Management and Energy Transition. And just let's go ahead. Next slide, please. Okay, first of all, I think we should clarify and a little bit highlight what are the European Standards Organization. We've got three of them, Sen, Senelec, and ETSI. Sen is covering the general field except for the electrotechnical standardization and the telecommunication, and for which we have two other institutions, Senelec and ETSI. And they are recognized by European law, as you can see, as the official standards organization in Europe for standardization. So that's what we can see here. And okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so we unify in Sen and Senelec and ETSI 34 national members, European organization associations, and we also have participation of institutions, governmental bodies, affiliates, and so on. And what is also very important is that we do have an international cooperation with the International Standards Organization, ISO and IC. So that is really a very global outreach we have also as European standardizers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now let's step into the question about net zero and climate neutrality, which we raised and where we think we can also contribute as standardizers. So, next, please. A simple question, how can we verify that net zero has been achieved? You cannot just put a measuring instrument up in the sky and see whether you were successful or not. Next question, please. Next. Against which criteria can the contribution of products or procedures to achieving net zero can be assessed? Next, please. And how can we determine the benefits and the economic viability of net zero targeted activities? That's also quite an important question. Okay, and the other question is, can standards help to remove such roadblocks on the way to net zero? Next slide, please. I think we can give some answers, and the first thing we need to highlight is that the unique selling point of standards is really transparency and widespread recognitions, because we are able in the standards organization to unite diverging interests from whatever sources. It could be industrial federations, national committees, whatever you can imagine. And I think we have been quite successful in that. So next point, please. Okay, the European standards are best placed to, and now the next, please. Thank you. First of all, to provide generally accepted methodologies to determine energy savings and energy efficiency improvements. And just to let you know, we already delivered on that. So that's not just an ambition. Imagine standards like EN 16212 that has been published already many years ago, and it was a role model for the international standards ISO 17741 and 2, and those are dealing with energy efficiency and savings calculations, and they are also more domain specific. They have put in place some specific rules also for regions for determining this in projects. So next, please. We also are in a good position to establish sector-specific frameworks for the implementation and evaluation of decarbonization activities. And for that, I'm just going back to what we have already done in the sector forum energy management and energy transition. We have already some actively working groups on the transport sector, on the hydrogen sector, and they are actively and very intensively working in providing also some strategic guidance to the other committees who are more which are more product specific and procedure specific, to really work into a coherent framework. So next, please. The other thing is promote connectivity and interoperability of products and services to facilitate the transformation of those infrastructures and business models, because that's all about that. And one of the most prominent but not very new examples are the Senelec TC8X and the ICTC8. They are actually working on system aspects of electrical energy supply. And as they have been existing for quite some years now, and they really, you could see in their track of activities how they really continuously adapted their activities to those challenges. And there are quite a lot of deliverables already in place. Next, please. And also to determine technical criteria to determine the sustainability of products and services and hence their eligibility to be, for example, publicly funded and to benefit from what, from maybe also other public support. And we have already working on, we have been working on that in our working group in the sector forum energy management called financial tools. And we have also put rules, standards in place dealing with evaluation of energy related investments and energy performance contracting. So that's what I can give you as a proof that we are not just have an ambition, we already delivered on that, and I'm deeply convinced we will be further able to do so. So that's all I have. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I give back to you, Janik. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graser. Now I would like to leave the floor to Lina Constantinopoulou. Please, Lina.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lina Constantinopoulou. I'm the Policy Director at the Eurochambre. So Eurochambre is the Association of the European Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and we represent 45 members, 43 national associations of chambers of commerce, and 2 transnational chambers of commerce with 1,700 regional and local chambers. First of all, before I start, I would like to thank the organizers, COP26, the European Commission, as well as our co-hosts, Business Europe and Senelec, for this invitation. Now let's move to the hitting point. COP26, which was launched last week, is of course a pivotal moment to halt climate change. According to the recent IPCC report, we have seen that it remains still possible to keep the temperatures from rising by more than 1.5% over the pre-industrial baseline. But reaching this target is, of course, very difficult. It would require rapid reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but these reductions are not happening yet. Companies, of course, have the role, and they will play a decisive role in accelerating climate actions. Why? Decarbonizing their operations, developing and producing next generation technologies which can help these emissions. Therefore, we need to bring business along, and we need to set up a framework to enable them to take decisions in a cost-effective manner, giving them security, but also sufficient support in terms of knowledge, financial resources, especially for SMEs. Now, all these technologies, of course, can contribute to reductions, and all technologies must be taken into account. One important aspect that I want to highlight is, of course, fostering and building collaboration and new partnerships. COP26 is one of those partnerships, and it's important. And as business representatives, we hope that such an agreement would set the rules for a common carbon neutrality at a global level. At the same time, partnerships also are something that we, as Eurochamber, have in our DNA. Our national chambers of commerce are encouraging and boosting these partnerships, and we offer different support tools and initiatives. Now, let me give you 3 examples on how we are supporting this. First of all, the Finnish Chamber has the so-called Climate Commitment Initiative. This is a voluntary initiative which is aiming at companies to become carbon neutral by 2035. The Chamber, of course, organizes trainings on emission reduction, supporting on how to calculate a company's carbon footprint, but also provides a roadmap and a 5-year plan to reach this objective. Another very important example is the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. Let me just give you an example. The trainings that the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber is giving has delivered 1.2 million megabytes per year, which amounts to 400,000 tons of CO2 reductions in just delivering energy savings. So this is enormous. They have also trained more than 5,500 energy managers in 39 countries, which is an amazing number if you want to really help. What is also happening is that they are trying also to standardize this training in all the at the European level. Now, what is also important is that they are delivering project work. They are implementing this in their own network of companies, and they are exchanging and learning from each other. A third example is, of course, VOCA. VOCA has implemented the Charter of Sustainable Entrepreneurship. This is the Flanders Chamber of Commerce, which is based here in Belgium. Of course, certification is a very important aspect. So UN SDGs constitute, of course, a universal framework in this regard. And VOCA is convinced that businesses can make contribution in achieving the SDGs. For example, each company can subscribe to this charter, and they have to undertake corporate sustainability in the company policy, but also formulate goals and specific actions that have an impact to the UN SDGs. Of course, the enterprises that are participating to this charter, 3 times within a time frame, they are provided with a UNITAR, which is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research certificate, which I think is quite an impressive outcome. Now, in 2029, VOCA chambers deliver training to more than 265 companies which have taken part to this charter. And again, companies have taken their part. Concluding, I will just say that this is just a small fraction of many of various services that chambers of commerce offer their members companies. And we are planning to do much more, and we are also very hopeful that the national recovery plans will offer this opportunity. Now, another important element is that we see these actions implemented by chambers of commerce in various fields. For example, energy, circular economy, consulting, food waste. And we see our role as Eurochamber as multiplier and network with high outreach, and especially to this high number of SMEs that are out there. Offering, of course, the services depend a lot on the availability of the financial resources. Again, I mentioned the role of many types of EU funding frameworks that can also help in this perspective. We will continue, of course, to support our companies and to build capacities and to build networks. And of course, I hope that this collaboration that we had in this event, together with Business Europe and Sensenelec, can bring just, the first sparkle for an ongoing cooperation between ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina. Thanks for your very interesting words. And now, last but not least, I'm happy to leave the floor to Torbjörg Fossum.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to join you. So we are on a transition to net zero also in Equinor, and that implies massive investment in renewable, which will feed into the increasing demand for electricity as more and more of the energy system is being electrified. But not all parts of the energy system can be electrified. And that is why we are also developing solutions which are based on carbon capture and storage, CCS. There is really no scenarios that can get us to the 1.5 degree without significant use of this technology. And that is also stated by the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And CCS is basically a technology that captures the CO2 from the emission source before it reached the atmosphere. And it's then stored several thousand meters under the ground. You store them in the same kind of storages that has kept oil and gas trapped for millions of years. So it's really large storage containers that the nature itself has developed. I think it's quite well known that this technology is a solution that can decarbonize the heavy industry such as cement, where there are large amounts of CO2 emitted in the process of producing cement. But the technology can actually offer more, including negative emissions if you combine it with direct air capture. And CCS enables production of clean or blue hydrogen at the scale necessary for the energy-intensive segments. So hydrogen has the great advantage that it can store large amounts of energy, and it can be relocated to where it's needed and used when it is needed. And this is important, different to fossil fuel, it does not emit CO2 when it's being combusted because the CO2 has already been removed. The figure here to the right illustrates how the decarbonization becomes more and more complex and challenges if you follow the examples from the left to the right side. And if we start with the easy side, the left side, a car, for example, can be decarbonized with renewable electricity and battery. But for the bigger units, if you look to the right-hand side, batteries are not suitable. If we take a ship as an example, it requires long-range solutions, and batteries can only provide a few hours of sailing before it has to be recharged. Hydrogen can offer, weeks and up to 1 month of sailing before you have to refuel. Another example on the right side is the power sector. There is a challenge with the energy supply when the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining, and then hydrogen can serve as a clean backup fuel. And also, very important, it also can be a significant energy storage to manage seasonal fluctuations, difference between summer and winter, and cold winters and warm summers, and so on. And then heavy industry, where hydrogen can provide the scale and the constant supply of fuel, which is necessary to decarbonize these segments. And by the way, one of our projects are with the large steel supplier ThyssenKrupp in Germany, where we are looking into replacing coal with blue hydrogen, and this will significantly reduce the emissions in the steel production. So if you can take me to the next slide, please. The good thing with carbon capture and storage is that there is a great opportunity to store CO2 beneath the North Sea. There's large storage capacity. And there's also a lot of data and knowledge from the oil and gas activities that now can be used to qualify and develop storage sites. And another good thing is that we are not starting from scratch. The technology is ready and available. And if you look on a world basis, there are now 27 industrial CCS projects in operation. A lot of them in North America, where you can do it onshore. But we also have unique experience in Europe. And that's illustrated on this slide. So we started offshore storage at Sleipner in 1996, 25 years ago. This was then the first offshore storage in the world. And then later we developed Snøhvit. And actually even today, these two projects stand out with unique experience and knowledge. And we share this with society and stakeholders to grow the confidence in CCS as a climate solution. And the next project now is Northern Lights, which will be in operation in 2024. And if you take me to the next slide, This project is unique compared to Sleipner and Snøhvit because it offers a CO2 transport and storage service to industries in Norway and Europe that want to capture their emissions, but they need somebody else to take care of the CO2 afterwards. And we really have to say we are amazed by the interest. We see capture project being matured by a broad range of industries, ranging from cement, steel, waste to energy, bioenergy, and even direct air capture, to mention some. And the figure to the left here shows the portfolio of potential customers. It's 10 times the capacity of what Northern Lights can offer. And this has strengthened, our company believe that credible CO2 storage capacity must be matured to stimulate capture projects to progress. So therefore, we have also recently announced ambition to develop CO2 storage capacity 10 times Northern Lights by 2025. And we are already on the task and will soon announce more CO2 storage projects. But it must be said that even if there is a clear momentum for CCS, this is not a walk in the park. The first wave of projects, they will need governmental support and subsidies to be realized. But these projects are so important. They are the pioneers. They are the ones that test and develop the commercial and the regulatory framework. And they really pave the way for scale and cost reduction and CCS business without subsidies. And we believe that if we work together, industry and government, private and public sectors, we can actually get to commerciality by the end of this decade. So thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Torbjörg, and thanks a lot to all our speakers. I think we really heard some very interesting study cases, some very interesting best practices, but now we just have to leave for a very short sanitation break. Please stay with us because when we come back, we will continue with a very interesting debate and panel discussion. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Good afternoon again, and welcome again. I would like to thank again for their very interesting remarks, the keynote speakers we had in the first part of today's event. I think that what we heard provides very good food for thought for what we are going to have now, which is our panel discussion. I am very glad to have here with me and joining us remotely a very high-level panel with very interesting personalities. We have Peter Handley, Head of Unit Energy Intensive Industries and Raw Materials at DG GROW at the European Commission. Then we have here in Brussels, Nick Bitzios, Chair of the Energy and Climate Working Group at Business Europe, and also Head of the Brussels office of Mytilineos SA. Then we have Julian Schorp, Director, European Energy and Climate Policy at the German Chamber of Commerce, DIHK. And last but not least, Solange Blaskowski, Leader of the Circular Economy Group at the Senelec Strategic Advisory Body on the Environment and also Director at Philips. So if you don't mind, I would like to kickstart this discussion by asking a first general question to all of you. And what I would like to get your ideas on is what do businesses need to rapidly deliver on the climate goals? And I would like to start asking this question to Mr. Peter Handley.
Thank you very much. I'll mention 4 things. I think businesses need a predictable regulatory framework. And here we've already presented the Fit for 55 package, and there's more regulatory stuff coming down the road in a few months' time with the gas package. Secondly, they need funding. They need some de-risking. And here we've put a bunch of funding instruments together in the new multi-annual financial framework and through the recovery plan. And we're also trying to send the right signals to the markets through the taxonomy under the sustainable financing regulation. Thirdly, I think businesses need market creating actions. So this is where things like standards and public procurement or information for consumers through the Sustainable Products Initiative all give the right kind of signals. And I think lastly, businesses need protection from unfair trading practices by competitors around the world. So we need a strong and robust use of trade defense instruments.
Thank you, Peter. Same question to you, Nick.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Giovanni. For us at Business Europe, we really think this is primarily an issue of identifying the various barriers that exist to decarbonization and then finding ways to eliminate them. And really, if I can focus on one issue above all else, it's really ensuring that we can have access to the required volumes of low carbon energy at globally competitive prices. So if we think first about renewable electricity, this is an area in which we're already doing quite well. And I'd like to say a big well done to the European Commission as well for the recent proposal on the Renewable Energy Directive, which really does a good job of trying to firstly identify these barriers and then proposing things that can be done to overcome them. So that it looks at things such as permitting. We need to make sure that there are more renewables coming onto the grid and much faster as well. It looks at how we can overcome the barriers that still exist with regard to PPAs, both for SMEs and larger companies as well. And one more issue that I'd like to highlight is a physical barrier, which is the grids. And it's really great to see the announcement that we had recently at COP26 on the Green Grids initiative, which can really help to ensure that we can produce renewables in the places where they're cheapest to produce. So if you think, for example, in deserts, fantastic potential there for solar PV. Offshore wind as well, a lot of potential there which is still untapped. And then beyond that, of course, as already mentioned in this panel, there are various sectors and processes that will not be able to be electrified. And there we really have to look at low carbon and decarbonized fuels. And I stress both of these points because if you look at the scale of the challenge that we have to overcome, we really have to make sure that we are using each and every option that we have available to us. Many of these options do involve higher costs than the options that we have today. So we have to make sure, firstly, that the support is there for the companies that will be trying to make these investments. And on the other hand, as Peter already touched upon, we need to make sure that the required carbon leakage protection is there for as long as we do not yet have a global agreement on carbon pricing.
Thank you, Nick. I would like to hear also what Julian Schorb has to say.
Yes, many thanks, first of all, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today with you. Basically, I could just repeat what just said. So I won't do that, and we just use my short time to say a few additional points that have already been mentioned, basically. So we can say that for us, climate neutrality is a big opportunity, of course, for many, especially German companies. It's a big opportunity, but at the same time, it's just also a historic challenge. We really have to admit it. And especially for countries like Germany, which have nowadays a very strong industrial base. So what do we need now? The climate neutral energy supply was already mentioned. I would also like to highlight that, but I would also like to say that we are still very far from where we need to be, actually. Even a country like Germany, which is a front runner when it comes to the energy transition, is still way too slow. The renewable deployment in Germany is way too slow, and really have to tackle the lengthy permitting and planning procedures. And I think there are some good elements in the new proposal for the Renewable Energy Directive, but we should go much further, actually. Same for PPAs. There's some good elements in the Commission's proposal, but still it's a very vague provision. And from our point of view, it won't change much how businesses can use this tool to, let's say, access cost efficiently renewable energy. So we also have to improve the provisions at EU level on that point, but also at, of course, at the member state level. Effective carbon leakage protection was already mentioned. I think this is crucial. Carbon prices are rising to record levels now with the 54-55 package Peter Handley has just mentioned. So on carbon pricing, Europe is, we can say, clearly a lonely front runner. Almost not any other major trading partner is following us on this part. Especially when it comes to energy-intensive industries. So we really need an effective protection. And from our point of view, the now intensively discussed proposal for a carbon border adjustment mechanism is not the right path to go for. From our point of view, this won't help. And of course, last point, and I'll stop. We need state support on this point also. We have a lot of important decisions that are currently taken in Brussels. You all know the European Commission defines the framework for national state aid measures. And here we also clearly see some positive developments, but also very risky and negative developments, especially when it comes to electricity price compensation mechanisms. So we still have a lot of work to do. It's a big opportunity, but we really have to tackle all these hurdles. And in many areas, we really need a kind of revolution. It's not about adjusting a little bit the planning procedures. It's not about, let's say, using some types of hydrogens or not others. We really need, let's say, a very pragmatic approach, and we have to go very, very fast.
Thank you very much, Julian. And what is your take, Solange?
Thank you, Giovanni. There are studies out there that show that 7 out of 10 companies are already reporting on their emissions, or they are developing something around that. However, 1 out of 10 business only is able to be confident the way they interpret and the way they're measuring is appropriate and is correct. So if you think in terms of the first phase, so the scope 1 is relatively easy because it's measuring its own operations, but as we go downstream, looking into the suppliers, that becomes a lot more difficult. Only a few companies have already announced that they are going to be working with the suppliers to reduce the emissions there. Philips is one of these companies. And as we go upstream, then it becomes really difficult. Yeah, and for that, governments and industry and organizations in general, they need clear guidance. They need an easy way to implement the net zero. So what we need is standards. We need standards to help organizations to implement the net zero. So CEN and CENELEC in Europe, but also at international level, ISO, ITU, and IEC offer a very offer a trust and consensus-based framework for that. So they have organizations to really implement basic concepts into that are very complex, because let's say climate neutrality is a very complex topic. They help organizations to measure, to assess the emissions, but they also even help the organizations with claims and giving the trust that they are not going to be accused of greenwashing, for example. So yes, we need standards.
Thank you, Solange. Now for the second round, I would like to get a bit more into depth by asking you some more specific questions to each of you. And I would like to start with you, Nick, by asking you, how do we make sure that we can bring new technologies to market at scale in time to have an impact on emissions? And also related to this, how do we make existing technologies widely available?
Sure, it's a very good question and a very important one as well. And it's really all about innovation. So that covers both developing and producing new products, making sure that they are, we manage to get them onto the market. But beyond that, also focusing on the products and technologies that we already have and looking for any ways that we can make them better. We can make them cheaper, and we can make them as efficient as possible as well. And in a lot of ways, we're fortunate in Europe that we do already have a lot of tools, a lot of mechanisms, and a lot of funds out there that already help us to achieve this. We have Horizon, of course, that's been playing a very important role for quite a while now. More recently, we have the Innovation Fund that really helps to take that final step of actually getting the product onto the market. And even more recently than that, we have a very good proposal in the ETS directive on carbon contracts for difference. And we think that those can play a really, really important role for the companies that are trying to make these innovative investments and trying to get them onto the market. Now, in terms of how we go about all of this, we think that it's important to look into the past and to take the lessons that we can take from how we've approached the issue of getting renewable electricity into the system. Where that's really an area which is 10, 20 years ahead of many of the other technologies that we're talking about today. So we can look at what worked well and what didn't work so well. So initially, the way that we did it led to very significant costs, which for a very long time and still causes problems. Germany is a very good example of this. But over time, we learned from this. We started introducing more market-based approaches, auctions, which really helped to drive down the cost to the greatest extent possible and making the schemes as cost efficient as possible. So I really think that we need to be doing the same for each and every other technology that we are trying to get onto the market from here on in. And then we also have to think globally. And we're looking now to the negotiations that are going on at the moment in Glasgow, where we really hope that we have some breakthroughs, both in relation to the technology mechanism, but also on Article 6, which we think can play a very, very important role here as well.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And back to Julian with the question, which existing mechanisms or tools should be further strengthened, considering also the important need to take SMEs on board?
Many thanks for very good questions. Most of our members are indeed SMEs, typical for Germany. So what I would say here is that SMEs in general, they don't have the same capacities as bigger companies when it comes to dealing with climate risks. And it was mentioned in the introduction statement that, let's say, remaining carbon intensive really becomes a business risk now. And not only for bigger companies, which are under the EU ETS in Europe, but also for smaller companies. In Germany, for instance, we have now launched a national ETS that includes a lot of process heat from SMEs. So this process heat now basically is produced with fossil fuels, but the CO2 price we have now put in place that will rise over the next 10 years will not allow these companies to continue like this. Business as usual is not an option anymore for them, and that's really, we can say that's for the broad picture of the economy. This rule applies. So we really need to take SMEs on board, and I think many of them, they don't even know how exposed they are to carbon risks, to climate risks. I think the first step is to raise the awareness, and I think many of them really have to start dealing with this issue very, very seriously. I think standards can play a role here, training can play a role here, for instance. And we as a chamber organization in Germany, for instance, we are just working and launching soon a kind of digital platform which will bring together people who work on climate within SMEs, and we will be able to exchange on solutions, targets, climate strategies on this platform in the digital environment. And we really hope that this will boost climate action also within SMEs. And I think I'll stop here and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Julian. And Solange, how are industries applying circular economy to achieve climate neutrality?
Okay. The forecast that, and you must know that, is that by 2050, we are all going to be 10 billion people. Yeah. And with that, we are really over-consuming. So if we don't change the patterns, the way we are consuming our today, we are going to be consuming the equivalent of 3 planets by 2050. Just to give you an example, dysprosium, for example, is used in windmills and the magnets. It will increase the demand by 2,600%, and it's really not sustainable. So with the increase of consumption, we also have a tremendous increase in the production of waste, and we keep taking more materials from the ground, so we are also depleting our planet. And circular economy has ways and means to help solve that issue. So that's the link we have with the climate change and depletion of the earth. The principles of circular economy are of using intelligent designs to produce less waste and to keep materials as much as possible, as long as possible in the economy, along with renewable of the resources. So just give you an example of Philips and the use of helium. Helium is used as a cooling material. It's a gas, yeah. And when helium comes to the atmosphere, it's just disappeared. It goes to the space, so we lose it. And helium is used in MRI, so magnetic resonance equipment, so healthcare equipment, but also science equipment, as a cooling agent. So nowadays, the most equipments that we have on the market, they use 1,500 liters of helium, yeah, and it's an open system, so there is loss of the helium, so it needs to be replenished all the time. And Philips has developed, it's really a breakthrough innovation, where we have been able to reduce 1,500 liters into only 7 liters, which is 95% reduction on the use of this relatively rare gas. So it's a tremendous accomplishment. And with that, also the system is now closed, so we don't lose helium anymore, and we don't need to replenish it during the operations. So this is a beautiful example of how we can help through circular economy, so through through sustainable use of resources, help the climate situation.
Thank you, Solange. And now back to Peter Handley. Peter, energy-intensive industries are facing some of the biggest challenges in terms of decarbonization. How does the European Commission intend to support these industries in their transition, which will likely be capital intensive?
Well, you've got the ETS system, and here we're actually reducing the free allowances, but pushing that money across into the innovation fund. So there's going to be a much expanded innovation fund to help get first-of-a-kind demonstrators through. In fact, there's plenty of money around. We've got InvestEU, we've got Horizon Europe, we've got the Just Transition Fund. I would say that there's plenty of EU instruments, plenty of ways to de-risk, and what we need are the projects. And there, I'm pleased to say we've got investment pipelines coming out of the raw materials and the batteries alliances, out of the hydrogen alliance, and I know that many of the energy intensive industries are doing the same. What we really need is to bring chief executives over the line so that they make the decisions that they're going to invest in the development of these clean technologies in Europe rather than other parts of the world. And as I say, we have alliances, but we also have these public-private partnerships. We've got a lot of interest in important projects of common European interest for hydrogen, and we've got 2 of them in place already for the batteries, and it's already proved very good at accelerating innovation and the development of batteries value chain in Europe. So, I think there's plenty of money around, and I've already mentioned the policy actions that we're taking to support the energy intensive industries. And at the moment, we're actually working with them and with member states to develop a transition pathway to get them from where they are today towards the 2030 targets.
Thank you, Peter. For the last remaining couple of minutes, I would like to open the floor for a short Q&A. And I've been informed that there are 2 questions that I don't see yet appear. Okay, now they are. So the first question I see there from Mr. Anonymous is, could you specify which sectors by 2030 and 2050 cannot, in your view, be decarbonized or electrified? Who would like to answer to this question? Okay, Nick, please.
I think with regard to completely decarbonizing it, there are options for every sector. With regard to electrification, it looks like there are specific sectors where that will not be a viable option. So there you're looking at steel, chemicals, and then you also have some sectors with even more specific challenges. So if you look at cement as a very interesting sector where they have a very high level of process emissions, which means that there we will need carbon capture and either storage or use, which was touched upon earlier during this conversation. So really it's about tailoring the solutions to each specific sector each time.
Thank you. Is there somebody else who wants to add something, or can we move to the second question? Okay, then can I see again the questions, please? Okay, thanks. Safeguards to prevent accidents and impact research on the environment for CO2 storage, especially under the sea. And this was addressed to the first panel, but I don't know if somebody here wants to step in. Don't be shy. Okay, then it's not in the expertise of the second panel. I'm sorry for the Mr. Anonymous who asked the second question, but there might be other occasions. Now, I'm very sorry, but the time at our disposal is over, has finished. But I think today we listened to a lot of very interesting remarks, a lot of very interesting experiences, and we actually hope that some of the messages that emerged from today will be taken up by policymakers and also by negotiators in Glasgow at COP26. I would like to thank all the speakers who participated today, and also would like to thank all of you here in Brussels and all around the world for having been here with us, and we hope that everybody learned as much as I did in moderating this event. Thanks a lot, and follow all the other events organized in the framework of the European Union side events of COP26. Thanks a lot, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.